So after my last video, I'm pretty sure you just want to get to the code. So let's do that. First thing we're going to do is we're going to set up our SharePoint framework environment. I know there are many videos out there, but I think I could create a video just to give you a little bit more of an elaboration on how to accomplish this and what some of the ways that I go about doing this. There was recently a new version of SharePoint framework that was released, so it's a good time for me to go ahead and update my version here. So I thought I would go ahead and go forward with that. First thing we have to do is go into Google and look up Setup SharePoint Framework Development. You can click on that first link. First thing you're going to need to do is install Node.js. I've already done that. So if I do a quick check, I am on version 22. If you want to check, just like I did, you can do so. And once you've done that, go ahead and install the Gulp CLI, Microsoft Generator SharePoint, and install those globally. You're also installing Yo. Sorry, I should have said that. And in the interest of time, I went ahead and paused the video and restarted it after the installation occurred. Also, it goes without saying that you have to have obviously Visual Studio, a code editor. I use Visual Studio Code. You can use others, but I use Visual Studio Code. So once you have those three things installed, the next thing that we have to do is go ahead and set up an actual web part. So to get that web part started, we just click here on web parts, build and deploy your first web part, and we just basically copy this command to your terminal. Why I do this way is because I feel that it's always important to look at the documentation. Things always change. In this video, whenever you're watching it, it might have already changed. So my advice, the best advice that I can give you is always go to the documentation. Don't necessarily use the commands in this video. The overall concepts are going to be, relayed to you in this video, but I just don't want you to get into a habit of basically looking at a video and essentially putting whatever the demonstration is putting on the screen. It's always important to follow what is in the documentation. With that being said, let's go ahead and give our solution a name. I didn't get any comments on any ideas, so I'm just gonna go with my original tackle box web part. And since I'm going to use React Framework, I'm going to put RF at the end. You don't have to do this. I just do this so that I know what I did. It is going to be a web part, and we're going to call it Tackle Box, my web part, and it is going to use React. All right, and just like that, we're all set. Again, in the interest of time, I've forwarded it to this portion where we now have our brand new installation completed. You may ask, why did I wait and not run the next command, which says gulp trust dev cert? If you run this, I noticed that when you try to run this on the terminal, if you don't actually have gulp installed, which we do, well, how do I know that? Because we have a gulp file JS here. Also, if you look at the package JSON, gulp is installed on this folder. And really, this folder, this area is where we want to trust. So let's go ahead and run the command now. When you run that command, it will basically run a script in Gulp that allows it to trust the development certificate. At least this is how I understand it. You have your Visual Studio Code, which connects to your SharePoint site, and there has to be some level of trust between the node server that's running all of your development artifacts, all of your files, etc., and the actual SharePoint site. So once that is completed, you'll also see this prompt that says, do you want to install the certificate? Go ahead and say yes. And voila, you're all set. Now, if we go back to the documentation, after when you go back to the web parts, getting started, building and deploy, it's going to tell you to run gulp serve. I disagree with this option. The reason being is because gulp serve takes a very long time to run, and it runs every single time you make a change. So essentially what you have is, and every time you make a change, you have a configuration, reset up, everything happens over and over again. And then gulp serve takes a long time. So my recommendation is not to do that unless you absolutely want to. But it's entirely up to you, but I don't recommend it. Go ahead and give it a shot. I'm not going to do it for this video. It just takes way too much time. But I definitely don't recommend that. Instead, what I recommend in its place is doing something a bit different. I recommend using Fast Serve. So in a new tab, go ahead and look up SPFx Fast Serve. And you're going to see an article here in C# corner where it tells you how to implement it. And trust me when I tell you that this is a whole lot faster and is a way more efficient way of developing. So just copy this command, paste it into your terminal. Go ahead and get the next command ready, which is going to be SPFx Fast Serve. We're going to patch that in. And all you have to do is basically just press enter, and it's going to run the installation. Once the installation is complete, you're going to go back to, you don't run npm run serve because that's what we use to have the nice speeded up version of serve. We're not going to run that yet. We're going to wait for that command. What we're going to do is we're going to go to the deploy section. So what we're going to do instead is go to here, and we are going to go to copy this command here. So what's going to happen is, actually, let me show you because this doesn't have everything encapsulated. So typically when you go to deploy a web part, you want to run gulp clean, and you're going to run gulp build. And after gulp build, typically you run gulp bundle and gulp package solution. Now, there's one important thing to remember. If you add the parameter ship to any of these two commands, that means you're getting it ready and everything's ready to go, and you don't have to worry about files being copied over. We don't want to do that in this scenario because we're still in development mode. When you're not in development mode, and I'll cover a video on how to deploy later, but we're just looking at these commands because that's what we need right now to make Fast Serve run. Okay, so you're going to copy them exactly as you see them here. If you're ready to deploy, that's going to be a different video. Okay, so let's go ahead and copy gulp bundle, paste it here. And while that's running, we're going to we're going to copy gulp package solution. Give that a moment to run. And all of this kind of is a preview of what happens when you run gulp serve without running fast serve. It basically runs all these different commands for you, but it does that every single time you make a change, and that is redundant. It is not time efficient, and when you're doing development and you're working on stuff, you kind of want to go one thing after the next. The only caveat I will add is that when you add any SCSS files, you do have to build it, because again, when you build it, this SPFx Fast Serve does not build your solution. And in order for that SCSS file to be visible to your component, it's gonna have to be that you're gonna run the gulp build command so that shows up. Once that is up and running, then you can rerun your npm Fast Serve. But that's not happening all the time, right? We're not creating SCSS files all the time. That generally happens whenever you're creating new components, which at first it will kind of be a bit of a thing that you will have to do. But when the time comes out, I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so now our solution is packaged. And now what we have to do is, there are two options on where you're going to deploy this solution. First, let me show you where the solution lies. If you noticed when we were recording this, there was a new folder added here called SharePoint. And here is my installation package. Okay. So there are two options to load this. In my demo, I'm going to be installing this to the the app catalog for my sites. But before I go to the app catalog, I want to open this in the file explorer, and then we can go to the app catalog in my sites. Going to drag and drop our web part. That's going to prompt you to deploy and make it available to your environment or organization. When you click on deploy, that officially deploys the web part. Now, you may not have access to this. So there are some environments where you have to go to an admin to get them to do so. You provide them that package file and then they can upload it. If you are lucky enough to have an environment where the admin can create for you an actual site collection app catalog, that's even better because you'll have access to the site collection app catalog and you can load your web part there. Now that the app catalog has the web part, keep in mind that this is running everything from your local environment. Remember, one of the things I mentioned was that if you didn't put the ship flag on the command for both bundle and package solution, then essentially what you have is just a shell of your web part that has now been installed. What that allows us to do is be able to run Fast Serve now. So we're going to go back and we're going to run Fast Serve. So let's copy npm run serve into our command prompt. And now what you'll notice is that it's going to run this process. And yes, it is long, but just imagine that this process runs every single time you save. It would not be ideal. So by doing this, you are basically running this once and you're done. In the meantime, while this is loading, I'm going to go ahead and open my newly created site. Another note I would make is if you make any changes, and I'll explain these more or less to the settings of your web part. For example, on the web part itself, when you edit the page, what you'll notice is that when you try to add that web part that I just created called Tacklebox, it's going to have just a page icon. If you want to change that or any of the settings in the manifest of the web part, you're going to have to run that process again of clean, build, bundle, and ship the package solution rather without the ship parameter. Okay, so that's why it's important that you keep that in mind. And I'll touch a little bit on that information when we go through the anatomy of the web part. All right, so if I go here, you'll notice that my new web part that's called Tacklebox. And what I was mentioning is you see that icon that looks like a page. If you make a change to that, don't expect to see that change unless you rebuild the solution and redeploy it again. Okay. There's certain changes when you're doing changes to the code, then definitely they will show up. When you're doing SCSS changes, you have to build it again, as I mentioned, and you'll see as we go through the process what I'm referring to. But let's go take a look and see if we're ready to go. And it says that there are no errors found, so we are ready to go indeed. So we can go ahead and add it, and there it is. Our web part is ready to go. So now we can work in a nice page for our development purposes. And now, very briefly, I want to go over the anatomy a little bit of the web part, as I mentioned. Um, First, as I mentioned before, we have the package. This is going to be what we do drop into the app catalog so that this can be deployed onto the SharePoint site. And again, this is just a very brief overview. I'm not going through the whole thing. If you have any questions and you need a more in-depth and you would like a more in-depth video on that, leave me a comment. I really appreciate it if you would, and I would be happy to do so. But again, this is just a brief overview. Inside of our source folder, this is where we find our web parts. There can be more than one web part in here. We're not going to be doing that, but again, if you want to see a video on that, please drop it in the comments and I'll be happy to see what we can do about that. Um, and if we expand our web parts folder, you'll see that we have a folder for components. This is where we're going to be building most of our web part. So think of this as area where all of our building blocks are going to be put into. This tackle box web part TS, obviously these are going to be named according rather to your web part name. And so in my case, it's tackle box. So this is the main entry point for your web part. This is where you'll find your initialization function, the environmental message to find out what environment your web part is running in. And then one of the most important parts is let me minimize this here, the side panel. So whenever you go into the web part settings, if I click on edit here, and I open the web part settings, this is what it's talking about. So right now we have a description field. So as you can see, we have a field called description field. And so these are what you see on the side panel. Um, when the web part renders, it's going to run this render method that basically loads this element called tacklebox, as mentioned here before, and it is passing these properties. These properties are defined in itackleprops. So if we go to the definition, you'll see that it's this property file where you have additional properties that are going to be passed um, to that portion. I do touch on that because, like I said before, we're going to be using um, TypeScript for this solution, which I guess again I cannot praise it enough. It's going to help you a lot with your development process. And speaking of that, we have an assets folder. So inside of your assets folder, this is typically where I recommend you store all of your types. We're going to be covering that as well. So a lot of great information is coming your way in the upcoming videos. Oh, and the last thing I guess I could touch on is also your package JSON. This is where all of your dependencies get installed, and your dependencies are the pieces of a code, libraries and such that you utilize, like PNP and the others that I talked on the toolchain. This is where we're going to be installing those. Dev dependencies, those are things that don't get deployed. These can include types. If you're using some other library that requires types for TypeScript, those are going to be there. Gulp, like I said, is and TypeScript. These things will not be deployed in your package. So you definitely want to keep them separate. And as we go through this process, you'll see what we do to configure our packages correctly. With that being said, I'm glad you joined me. And if this is helpful to you, I cannot stress it enough how much I would really appreciate it if you can subscribe, drop a like, and even a comment. And if you even have something that you disagree with, if I got something wrong or you think that I got something wrong, or you know that I got something wrong, because I'm no expert here, I'm just trying to share as much knowledge as I can. Please let me know. I really welcome any kind of constructive criticism. I would really appreciate it. And with that, I guess I'll catch you on the next video.